Okay, we're on explore number 2, photosynthesis, and we're going to actually dig deep here. So prepare yourselves. All right, it's going to be pretty technical. Go ahead and write down the essential question: how does the process of photosynthesis work? Go ahead and write your date down. Write down for reference Discovery Education Living Earth 2.2.2, and tell me what you know or think. Okay, as much as you can without looking at the notes. Just what do you know about photosynthesis? All right, let's go ahead and start with Roman numeral 1, photosynthesis, and we're going to kind of be tracking our text there. And again, I really want to encourage you guys, make sure to be reading the text, watch the videos. Okay, my notes, I try to make them as comprehensive as possible, but it's not a replacement for you doing the heavy work. Read, dig into it, try to understand it. All right, so you can divide photosynthesis into two main stages. There's what we call the light dependent reaction. Obviously, from the sound of that, it's going to be using light from the sun. And you have a light independent reaction. So, we're going to talk first about the light dependent reaction. Um, you need to take a look at the resources you have on Discovery Education to understand some of these terms. It does take place in stacked like structures called thylakoids. Okay, and these are located inside chloroplasts of plant cells. Uh, it's inside of these things that you find a molecule called chlorophyll. And chlorophyll, obviously, when you slide on the grass, you get a grass stain. That's chlorophyll. That's that green molecule. So this green pigment actually absorbs many of the wavelengths of light. The only color it does not absorb is green. So it reflects it, and that's why plants appear green, because you're seeing the non-absorbed green wavelengths. So there's two photosystems that are involved. It's going to sound weird, but you start with photosystem 2. And that just happens to be the way they discovered these systems. They discovered a system, photosystem 1, and then they realized after the fact that there was a system that preceded that. And so we put photosystem 2 as the first one. In photosystem 2, light is absorbed by the chlorophyll. And if you recall, when you absorb something like a photon of energy from light, that can cause electrons to jump energy levels in their electron shells. If you absorb enough energy, you can actually excite the electron and cause it to just jump out of the orbit. And that's what's happening here. So that electron that is excited is going to be passed down what's called an electron transport chain. Okay, and this chain exists inside the membrane of a plant cell, inside the stroma. So the electron loses energy as it's passed along uh, this electron transport chain. I'm going to just run over here so you can kind of see here. You can see where the photons are being absorbed in photosystems 2. This is the first step, and you can see that the way this works, and I'm getting ahead of myself here just a tiny bit, is water. You know, plants need water, they pull it from the roots, but the purpose of that is to do what's called water splitting. Okay, so let's go back to our notes here. Electrons lose energy as they're passed along, and this energy is captured and used to convert adenosine diphosphate, ADP, to adenosine triphosphate. So you're going to use that electron to actually store energy, and you're going to add a phosphate molecule to ADP, an inorganic phosphate, and you're going to make it into adenosine triphosphate. This process is called photophosphorylation. You can see I've got that written there. Okay, so water splitting. The water is pulled up from the roots, and it's going to split the water into the hydrogen ions and into oxygen. The oxygen the plant doesn't need, but luckily for you and I, we need it. And so that's how much of the atmospheric oxygen that we have on Earth here today is because of this process. So remember, if we say that water is being split, you're going to produce hydrogen ions. Notice the positive charge there, a cation, right? It's a positive charge. These are going to be essential in this whole process. That's the whole purpose of water splitting, is to produce those hydrogen ions. Photosystems 1. Okay, so again, take a look at this picture. Then you can see from step 1, step 2, you can see how electrons that have been freed through the absorption of those photons, they're going to be transported across this membrane. It's a bilipid membrane. That's why you see the double kind of membrane here. There's one membrane on the top, and there's another lipid membrane on the bottom. And these electrons are being transported along this chain. In this process, you are building hydrogen ion concentration on one side of the membrane. Okay, that's going to produce a concentration gradient that's very useful for doing work. Think about a dam with stored up water, and you release the water, and that water flows through turbines, and we can use electricity. So this concentration gradient is used for work. Okay, so electrons ultimately are used by hydrogen ions to convert NADP, notice the plus sign, to NADPH. So the NADPH, notice there's not a plus or negative because it gains those electrons. That's why the NAD plus is now NADPH. That would be what we call a high energy molecule, similar to adenosine triphosphate. High energy molecules are used by biological systems to do work. All right, so continuing down, the electron transport chain, ETC, causes a potential difference across the membrane. You see that here. You see on the thylakoid interior space, you can see a high concentration gradient of hydrogen ions, all these H pluses. And in the stroma, you see very few of the hydrogen ions. So remember that systems want to achieve a state of equilibrium. So if you have a high concentration, these are going to pass across the membrane, if possible, until you have an equal amount on both sides. And that's how the work is actually done. So we said that you're going to create a potential difference because you have all those hydrogen ions on one side. And that's going to produce a form um of of active transport, or actually this is going to be passive transport. It's just going to passively move from high concentration to low concentration. And that's what we mean when we say they move across a concentration gradient. They move from a high concentration to a low concentration. Okay, and that's going to provide energy for phosphorylation of ADP to ATP, and that's going to be done through a membrane molecule, a protein called adenosine triphosphate synthase, or ATP synthase. I told you there was two stages. There was the light dependent, which required energy from the sun, and you have the second stage, which does not require any light at all. We call it a light independent reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle. And this takes place inside the stroma of a chloroplast. Okay, and again, you're going to have to take a look at some videos and pictures just to kind of visualize that. So what's happening here in the second system? Carbon dioxide, the gas that is in the atmosphere, that plants take that carbon dioxide and they use it for photosynthesis. Well, what exactly is happening is in this second stage, the CO2 is going to be converted into sugars. Okay, and that's, again, we call that a light independent reaction. And we call this process of carbon dioxide being converted as carbon fixation. What actually happens is CO2 is going to be reduced. If you remember our little acronym, Leo the lion says GER, gaining an electron is reduction. So carbon dioxide is going to gain electrons. It is going to be reduced, and it's going to, those electrons are actually coming from that high energy molecule, NADPH. Along with ATP, a sugar-like compound, not the sugar itself, is going to be made, and uh, that is going to exit the Calvin cycle to make glucose. Okay, and if we can maybe go down here, you can see that that high energy molecule is actually called glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. You can see it got that right here, glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. That is kind of the sugar-like molecule that is going to ultimately be making glucose. And what is that glucose going to be used for? It can be made for several things. The plant might use it for energy. It might be used to make other organic compounds, or you and I are going to eat the plant, or we're going to eat animals that ate the plant, and it's going to be passed down the food chain. Well, there you go. It's a lot for sure. And I try to keep that as quick and to the point as possible, but there's a lot that you have to digest here. So go ahead and write yourself a summary paragraph, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?